So this is the basic principle that we apply to our thought process around the smart grid. It requires a business architecture. It requires a technology architecture. Not everything that's available via our technology is relevant to the business case at this point. There's certainly technologies that go well beyond anything that could be justified from a business case perspective. So there's some trade-offs that happen. These are the multiple applications that happen within a utility today. And then there's this innovation, and this is where traditionally the smaller companies have really come forward, and the ecosystem of partners that we find to work with and utilities have found to work with over time have continually pushed innovation and shown that there are different ways to do things. It's not always about the process that we traditionally followed, and we have to be willing to change our operational processes to really adopt some of this innovation and let some of this happen. And it's only once you bring all four of those areas together that you really see a transformation happening in an industry. So this is our basic principle around smart grids. So we're transforming energy production, distribution, consumption using end-to-end IP as a platform. And our focus is to sustainably meet the world's energy needs. IP as a platform. Looking at that transformation chart earlier, we need network as a platform, and then we need collaboration. And we are now transitioning to that application space within the smart grid industry. So our collaborative model, I mentioned a little bit of this when I was mentioning our lessons learned. There's a variety of organizations and stakeholders that are relevant to the industry as a whole, as well as to Cisco and how we're building our strategy going forward. Application integration, engagement with regulators, understanding what is going to be enabled by policy. Then we can prepare technologies that are ready for those new policy innovations. Smart metering in many parts of the world would not be happening without regulators pushing utilities to say, it's time now to really give your consumers a different view on how they use electricity. So that's critical. Utilities realizing their customers are important. Overall, the governance and importance of government, and then technology standards. The reason we're focused on IP is because we've seen that as a platform transform so many other industries. And the utility industry has been a purpose-built industry for a long, long time. So it's important that whatever goes forward in smart grid is based on standards. And we're very fortunate as a company. We don't hear this very often, but our CEO actually made this statement as we were building our business unit, and we remind him of this as often as we can. And yes, we almost had an unlimited budget, and I stress the almost at this point. It wasn't quite what it sounded like, but no, we're very fortunate. In a year's time, we've got over 150 people focused on smart grid, dedicated to smart grid within Cisco. When I look at our global directory within the company and I type smart grid, I actually get about 500 people that somehow has tied smart grid into their title now, because it's a big buzz topic, and we have our CEO very excited about it. So they've managed to manipulate their positions to help. So our connected grid strategy, architecture, security, and then connected grid intelligence. It's really about working the ecosystem that we have with partners, applying it to every aspect of what's important to utilities. And these are the two traditional things that utilities have worried about: grid operations and the enterprise level from a business perspective. And now we're really working to apply the technologies. We're really working to apply networking technologies to the substation level at utilities, to the field area network. This is the part that most consumers and customers don't even realize exists. It's the wires that travel from the substation, and then the switching and automation that occurs out on the grid that traditionally hasn't been very automated. Traditionally, utilities have had to roll trucks to deal with anything outside the substation. There hasn't been a lot of automation there. And then, as Vesa talked about, the inside the home, there's the opportunity for the consumer to be so much more enabled now, be it display that may have some direct communication with the metering devices or direct connection through two-way communications through the metering system. Or it could be web-enabled and communicating through some sort of web portal. But to your point, a push to the consumer is extremely important. And just expecting that they're going to go onto the web and sign up and try to learn something means, yes, they are engaged, but how much of the population is engaged? If you look at smart thermostats, the programmable thermostats that you can program, morning time, go to work, cools off a few degrees in your home, come back, half an hour before you generally get home, maybe your furnace comes back on, warms the house back up. Majority of consumers, and at least in the US, the focus group study that was done was less than 20% in most areas of the US, people would ever program that thermostat beyond what the default settings were when they received it. In California, which is a much more environmentally sensitive area and social aware area, it was only about 30% of the population. It's just looking at some sort of device, unless there's information being pushed to the consumer, you've got to think about how much adoption and behavior change you'll actually get. And that's a challenge for utilities from a business model perspective, and that's why they're approaching it from these trials and demonstrations. It's a huge investment to put this type of technology to every customer that they have. So to truly understand, will we get benefit out of this? Even if we push the information to the consumer, will we get benefit out of this? That's an unknown question around the world today, and that's why we have not seen in any part of the world yet 100% rollout of a consumer enablement device yet. We've seen projects that go fairly far in a pilot stage and are maybe claiming that they're going to do a full-scale rollout, but one hasn't been completed anywhere in the world yet. So it's an interesting area that I think is still going to be explored for the next 5+ years. So. And then just as a wrap-up, we wanted to have a little thought-provoking from a timing scale, and pretty much anybody that talks about smart grid will have something like this. I actually was with Fortum's R&D VP yesterday in Stockholm, and he gave me kind of his version of this equivalent chart, and I saw the same thing with Vattenfall yesterday as well. But it's really the adoption of technology comes in waves, and it's based on what we think is going to, looking forward in the future, what is going to be relevant to our customer base, to the type of technologies that we may have to include because of industry driving something forward, policy driving something forward. So if you look at the timing varies depending on where you are in the world, but they generally come in some sort of way. In some areas, electric vehicles is going to be integrated on a mass scale a little bit earlier. In some cases, electric vehicles may be a little bit later. But these are generally the issues that we see talked about in every part of the world that we go to. And other than Latin America, I think I've been in every corner of the world here in the last 3 months just talking about this exact stuff. And it's really been interesting to see these similar discussions and similar problems. And there's fortunately some very good organizations worldwide that best practice sharing happens in. It's one good thing about the utility industry is it is a fairly small industry, and both the vendors that are involved, the innovators that are involved, and the customers that are in that area share information an awful lot, and it really is why we're seeing so many common industries around the world, or issues around the world.